The sound of a horse's hooves pounding against the dusty trail was the only music Kenton Ellis had ever needed in his 30 years of life. As he rode into the small town of Silverwater Creek, Wyoming Territory, in the spring of 1878, his reputation rode in with him, a man who took nothing seriously, especially not matters of the heart. "Look who the wind blew in," called Jasper, the aging blacksmith who was hammering a horseshoe into shape. "Thought you'd be halfway to Montana by now, Ellis." Kenton tipped his hat, a crooked smile playing across his sun-weathered face. "Got sidetracked by a card game in Laramie. Won enough to keep me comfortable for a spell," the blacksmith chuckled. "Just don't go breaking any hearts while you're here. Town's got enough widows and spinsters giving you the eye already." "Hearts are for fools and dreamers, old man," Kenton replied, his voice carrying the casual confidence of someone who'd never felt the sting of true loss. "I'm just passing through, same as always." Silverwater Creek was supposed to be a 2-day stop, just long enough to resupply, enjoy a proper bath, and perhaps find a friendly poker game. The town had sprung up around a silver mine some 15 years prior, and while the boom days were behind it, there was still enough prosperity to support a hotel, a saloon, a general store, and various other establishments that marked a town on its way to respectability. Kenton stabled his horse, a sturdy Appaloosa named Diablo, and made his way to the Silverwater Hotel. The 2-story clapboard building had seen better days, but it was clean enough for his standards. "Room for a few nights," he told the clerk, sliding a few coins across the counter. "And information on where a man might find some entertainment that doesn't involve church socials." The clerk, a thin man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose, pocketed the money. "Silver Dollar Saloon's got a poker game most nights, 3 doors down on the right." Kenton nodded his thanks, took the key, and headed upstairs to his room. It was sparse but clean: a bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. He'd certainly stayed in worse places during his years of drifting. After washing the trail dust from his face and changing his shirt, Kenton made his way to the Silver Dollar Saloon. It was early evening, and the place was starting to fill with miners, cowhands, and local businessmen looking to unwind after a day's work. He ordered a whiskey and settled at the bar, taking the measure of the room. The piano player was plunking out a lively tune, and several saloon girls were circulating, encouraging patrons to buy drinks. "You're new," said a voice to his right. He turned to find a man in a marshal's badge eyeing him with professional interest. "Just passing through," Kenton replied, lifting his glass in greeting. "Kenton Ellis." "Marshal Thomas Reeves," the lawman said, nodding. "We don't get many drifters these days. Most folk are settling down or moving west to California." Kenton shrugged. "Never saw the appeal of putting down roots. World's too big to stay in one spot." "And what brings you to our little corner of it?" "Nothing in particular, just following the trail." The marshal seemed satisfied with the answer. "Well, enjoy your stay, Ellis. Just keep your nose clean. We run a peaceful town here." As the evening progressed, Kenton found himself in a poker game with 3 local men: a shopkeeper named Wilson, a cattle rancher named Dawson, and the local doctor, Henderson. The stakes weren't high, but the conversation was good, and the whiskey flowed freely. "You ought to stick around for the town social on Saturday," Wilson said, arranging his cards. "My wife's sister is visiting from Denver. Pretty little thing, looking to settle down with a man of means." Kenton laughed, the sound genuine but dismissive. "I'm not in the market for a wife, friend." "Never have been, never will be." Dawson raised an eyebrow. "Every man says that until the right woman catches his eye." "Not this man," Kenton insisted, laying down his cards. Full house, gentlemen, kings over jacks. The men groaned good-naturedly as Kenton raked in the pot. Love's a fool's game, he continued, stacking his chips. Seen too many good men turned soft and stupid by a pretty face. They end up with a mortgage, a brood of children, and that haunted look of a man who's forgotten what freedom tastes like. Dr. Henderson chuckled. Spoken like a man who's never been in love. And proud of it, Kenton confirmed, raising his glass. I'll take the open trail and a reliable horse over a woman's fickle heart any day. The conversation shifted to other topics, but Kenton's declaration hung in the air like cigar smoke. It wasn't the first time he'd made such proclamations, and it likely wouldn't be the last. At 30, he'd seen enough of life to know what he wanted and what he didn't. The next morning, Kenton rose with the sun, his head slightly fuzzy from the previous night's indulgences. After a simple breakfast at the hotel, he decided to take care of his errands, restocking supplies at the general store, getting Diablo Rishad at the blacksmith's, and perhaps sending a letter to his younger brother in St. Louis. The general store was busy when he entered, with several ladies examining bolts of fabric and a couple of ranch hands buying tobacco. Kenton nodded politely and made his way to the counter where a portly man with a friendly face greeted him. "What can I help you with, stranger?" "Need to restock some trail supplies," Kenton replied, handing over a list. As the shopkeeper gathered his items, the bell over the door jingled and a hush fell over the store. Kenton glanced up, curious about the sudden change in atmosphere. A young woman had entered, her simple blue dress a stark contrast to the elaborate fashions of the other ladies present. Her honey-brown hair was pulled back in a practical bun, with a few tendrils escaping to frame a face that, while not conventionally beautiful, possessed a quiet dignity that caught Kenton's attention. "Miss Emmett," the shopkeeper said, his tone noticeably more formal. "What can I do for you today?" "I need some sugar and coffee, Mr. Porter," she replied, her voice soft but clear. "And perhaps some writing paper if you have it." There was something in the way the other customers drew back, the way conversations hushed, that piqued Kenton's curiosity. The woman, Miss Emmett, seemed to notice it too, her shoulders stiffening slightly as she approached the counter. "That'll be all for you, mister?" the shopkeeper asked Kenton, clearly eager to conclude their transaction. "For now," Kenton replied, paying for his goods and stepping aside. But rather than leave, he lingered, watching the interaction with interest. "We're running low on most everything, Miss Emmett," Porter said, not quite meeting her eye. "Maybe try back next week when the supply wagon comes through." The woman's face remained composed, but Kenton caught a flicker of something hurt, perhaps, or resignation in her eyes. "I see. Well, I'll try again later then. Thank you, Mr. Porter." As she turned to leave, one of the ladies examining fabric spoke in a stage whisper to her companion. The nerve of her, showing her face in town after what happened. The young woman's steps faltered briefly, but she continued toward the door, her head held high despite the flush creeping up her neck. Kenton found himself moving before he'd fully formed the thought, stepping between the whispering women and the retreating figure. "Excuse me, madam," he called to Miss Emmett. "I couldn't help but notice Mr. Porter seems to be experiencing some mysterious shortage that only affects certain customers." She stopped, surprise evident on her face. "It's quite all right, sir. I'm used to it." "Well, I'm not," Kenton replied, turning back to the shopkeeper with a hard smile. "I seem to have forgotten a few items on my list. I'll need sugar, coffee, and writing paper. The best you have." Porter's face reddened. "Now see here. I'm just a customer looking to make a purchase," Kenton interrupted pleasantly, though his eyes had lost their warmth. "Unless there's some reason you're refusing to sell to me as well." The silence in the store was deafening. Finally, Porter grudgingly gathered the requested items, taking Kenton's money with barely concealed disdain. Outside, Kenton handed the parcel to the astonished young woman. "I believe these are what you were looking for, miss." "Lucille Emmett," she replied, hesitating before accepting the package. "But most people call me Lucy, and I can't accept these without paying you." "Consider it a welcome gift from a fellow outcast," Kenton said with a grin. "Kenton Ellis." She studied him for a moment, her green eyes assessing. "Thank you, Mr. Ellis, but I don't need your charity or your gallantry, if you'll excuse me." She tried to hand the parcel back, but Kenton stepped away, hands raised. "It's not charity, Miss Emmett. It's a gesture of defiance against small-minded people. Besides, I've already forgotten what I paid for it." Something like amusement flickered across her face. "You're new in town, aren't you? Just passing through?" "Then let me give you some advice, Mr. Ellis. Associating with me won't do your reputation any favors in Silverwater Creek." Kenton laughed, the sound genuine and free of concern. "I've never much cared for reputations, Miss Emmett, least of all my own." She seemed to consider this, then nodded once. "Well, thank you for the supplies and the defiance." He watched her walk away, her back straight despite the weight of the town's judgment. There was a story there, he was certain of it, and despite his better judgment, he found himself curious to know what it was. That evening at the saloon, it didn't take much prompting to get the local gossips talking about Lucille Emmett. "Schoolteacher," the barkeeper explained, pouring Kenton another whiskey. "Or she was, until the scandal." "What scandal?" Kenton asked, feigning only casual interest. "Caught her father stealing from the mine payroll last year. He was the company accountant, shot himself before they could arrest him." The barkeeper leaned in closer, left her to face the music alone. "Town's never forgiven her for her father's sins, even though she's the one who reported the theft." Kenton frowned. She turned in her own father. Apparently she discovered the discrepancies and confronted him. When he refused to come clean, she went to the mine owner. Some say she hoped they'd be lenient if he confessed, but her father took the coward's way out instead. "And the town blames her for doing the right thing," the barkeeper shrugged. "Folks around here value family loyalty over honesty. Plus, several miners had their wages docked to make up the losses. They lost their homes, had to move on. Easier to blame the daughter than a dead man." "That's the most backward thing I've ever heard," Kenton muttered, downing his drink. "Maybe so, but that's how it is." "Miss Emmett lives out at her father's old place, about 2 miles east of town. Keeps to herself mostly. Tries to make a living selling eggs and vegetables, but most folks won't buy from her." Kenton shook his head in disgust. "And no one stands up for her." "Marshal Reeves makes sure no one bothers her too much, but he can't force people to treat her fair." The barkeeper moved away to serve another customer, leaving Kenton to his thoughts. The next day, Kenton found himself riding Diablo east of town, telling himself he was just exploring the territory. When he came upon a small, neatly kept farmhouse with a vegetable garden and a chicken coop, he knew he'd found Lucille Emmett's home. She was in the garden, kneeling among rows of what looked like beans, a wide-brimmed hat shielding her face from the sun. A small dog, some kind of terrier mix, barked at Kenton's approach, alerting her to his presence. Lucy stood, brushing soil from her hands as she watched him ride up. She didn't seem particularly surprised to see him. "Mr. Ellis," she said by way of greeting, "you're a long way from town." "Just exploring," he replied, dismounting. "Beautiful country around here." "Yes, it is," she agreed, though her tone suggested she was waiting for his real reason for visiting. "I heard you sell vegetables," he said, gesturing to her garden. "Thought I might purchase some for my stay." She raised an eyebrow. "Did you now?" And did you also hear that my vegetables are believed to be tainted by my father's disgrace? Kenton laughed. I've eaten rattlesnake and 3-day-old jerky, Miss Emmett. I think I can survive the scandal of your carrots. Despite herself, Lucy's lips twitched in amusement. Well, in that case, I have some lettuce, radishes, and early peas that are ready for picking. And eggs, if you're interested. I'll take whatever you recommend, he said, following her to the garden. As she gathered vegetables into a basket, Kenton found himself studying her more closely. In the morning light, away from the judgment of the townspeople, she seemed younger, more vibrant. He guessed she was in her mid-20s, though the worry lines around her eyes suggested she'd carried heavy burdens for someone her age. You were a school teacher? He asked, picking up a conversation thread he wasn't supposed to know. She paused, glancing up at him. Yes, until last year. You must miss it. Every day, she admitted, her voice soft. I loved teaching. The children, the books, watching them grow and learn. She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. But that's in the past now. Kenton felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. It's not right, what the town's doing to you. No, it's not, she agreed, meeting his gaze directly. But life isn't always fair, Mr. Ellis, as I'm sure you know. There was something in her steady gaze that suggested she'd sized him up, the drifter, the carefree cowboy, the man who proudly claimed to have no attachments. And somehow, she'd seen past it, to something he himself wasn't sure was there. Call me Kenton, he said, suddenly uncomfortable with her scrutiny. Kenton, she repeated, and he was surprised by how much he liked the sound of his name on her lips. Well, Kenton, here are your scandal-tainted vegetables. That'll be 50 cents. He handed her $1. Keep the change. I'll likely be back for more before I move on. When will that be? She asked, and for a moment he thought he detected a note of regret in her voice. Haven't decided yet, he replied, surprised to find he was being honest. Got no particular place to be. She nodded, handing him the basket. Well, safe travels when you do go. He tipped his hat and mounted Diablo, feeling oddly reluctant to leave. Miss Emmett, Lucy, would you consider selling some of your preserves as well? I've developed a taste for home-cooked meals that trail rations just don't satisfy. It was a transparent excuse to return, and they both knew it, but Lucy nodded. I have blackberry jam and pickled beans. Come by day after tomorrow, and I'll have them ready. Kenton found himself smiling like a fool as he rode back to town, the basket of vegetables secured to his saddle. He told himself it was just sympathy for her situation, perhaps a bit of indignation at the town's treatment of her. Nothing more. Yet over the next week, he found reasons to ride out to her farm almost daily. Sometimes he bought eggs or vegetables. Other times he offered to help with chores, fixing a loose board on the chicken coop, patching a leak in her roof. Lucy accepted his help with a blend of gratitude and wariness, as though waiting for him to reveal an ulterior motive. You know, most men would have given up by now, she remarked one afternoon as they sat on her porch, drinking lemonade after he'd helped her mend a fence. Given up on what? He asked, feigning innocence. She gave him a knowing look. On whatever it is you're trying to accomplish by befriending the town pariah. Maybe I just enjoy your company, he replied, surprised to find he meant it. Lucy was unlike any woman he'd known, intelligent, direct, and possessed of a quiet strength that had endured despite everything the town had thrown at her. Or maybe you're just the type who enjoys going against the grain, she suggested. The rebel who delights in thumbing his nose at convention. Kenton considered this. There might be some truth to that, he admitted. But it doesn't change the fact that I'd rather spend an afternoon here than listening to those self-righteous gossips in town. Lucy studied him for a moment, then asked a question that caught him off guard. Why do you drift, Kenton? What are you running from?" He started to give his usual glib answer about freedom and the open trail, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was the genuine curiosity in her eyes, or the fact that she'd shared so much of her own pain with him. "I had a sweetheart once," he said finally, watching the shadows lengthen across her garden. "Back in Missouri when I was 20. Ella was her name. We were engaged to be married. I was working my father's farm, had everything planned out." Lucy waited patiently as he gathered his thoughts. 2 weeks before the wedding, she ran off with a riverboat gambler who'd been passing through. Left a note saying she couldn't bear the thought of being a farmer's wife, of being tied to one place forever. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I sold my share of the farm to my brother and headed west, been moving ever since." "I'm sorry," Lucy said quietly. Kenton shrugged. "It was 10 years ago. I've had a good life, seen things most men only dream about. Can't say I regret it." "But you've never let yourself get close to anyone since," she observed. "Never saw the point. People leave one way or another. Better to keep moving than to be the one left behind." Lucy was silent for a long moment. "We have that in common then," she said finally. "Both of us left behind by the people who were supposed to love us most." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, or a shared vulnerability. Kenton found himself wanting to reach for her hand but held back, uncertain of how such a gesture would be received. The sun was setting when he finally rose to leave. "I should get back to town before dark." Lucy walked him to where Diablo was tethered. "Will I see you tomorrow?" "Count on it," he replied, surprised by how much he meant it. As days turned into weeks, Kenton found excuses to extend his stay in Silverwater Creek. The restlessness that had driven him for a decade seemed to have ebbed, replaced by a growing anticipation of his daily visits to Lucy's farm. They developed a routine of sorts. He'd arrive mid-morning, help with whatever chores needed doing, and they'd share a simple lunch. Sometimes they'd talk for hours, sharing stories of their lives, their hopes, and the disappointments that had shaped them. Other times they'd work in comfortable silence, each taking comfort in the other's presence. "You're spending an awful lot of time out at the Emmett place," Marshal Reeves remarked one evening when Kenton stopped by the sheriff's office to pass the time. "Just helping a neighbor," Kenton replied casually. Reeves gave him a knowing look. "Folks are talking. Let them. Got nothing better to do in this town, apparently." The marshal leaned back in his chair. "Miss Emmett's had a hard enough time of it without adding more fuel to the gossip fire." Kenton felt a flash of irritation. "My intentions toward Miss Emmett are honorable." "Are they?" Reeves challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're a drifter who's never stayed in one place more than a month. What happens to her when you move on? Think about that, Ellis." The marshal's words haunted Kenton as he rode back to the hotel. He had no answer to the question of what would happen when he inevitably moved on. The thought of leaving Lucy behind created an uncomfortable tightness in his chest that he wasn't ready to examine too closely. The next day, he arrived at Lucy's farm to find her arguing with a well-dressed man at her front door. The stranger's voice was raised, his manner intimidating as he loomed over her smaller frame. "Everything all right here?" Kenton called, dismounting quickly and striding toward them. Lucy turned, relief visible on her face. "Kenton, this is Mr. Grayson, the mine owner. He was just leaving." Grayson, a heavy-set man in his 50s with cold eyes and an expensive suit, looked Kenton up and down with obvious disdain. "And who might you be?" "A friend of Miss Emmett's," Kenton replied, deliberately placing himself between Lucy and the mine owner. "Well, friend, this is a private business matter. Perhaps you should make yourself scarce." "I think I'll stay," Kenton said mildly, though his stance was anything but casual. "What business do you have with Miss Emmett?" Lucy placed a restraining hand on his arm. "It's all right, Kenton. Mr. Grayson was just informing me that he's purchased the note on my father's property from the bank. He's generously offering to let me stay on as a tenant, provided I pay rent, of course." The sarcasm in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. Grayson smiled thinly. "It's more than fair, considering your father's indiscretions. You should be grateful I'm not evicting you outright." "How much?" Kenton asked abruptly. "I beg your pardon, how much for the property? I'm interested in buying it," Lucy gasped beside him. "Kenton, no." Grayson laughed, the sound as cold as his eyes. "This isn't some run-down homestead, Cowboy. The land alone is worth more than you'd make in 5 years. "Name your price," Kenton insisted, stepping closer to the mine owner. "Kenton, please," Lucy interrupted, her voice tight with emotion. "This isn't your fight." Grayson looked between them, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Well, well, I see how it is. The outcast has found herself a protector." He turned to Lucy. "You have until the end of the month to decide, Miss Emmett. Become my tenant or find somewhere else to live. Good day." As Grayson rode away, Lucy turned on Kenton, her eyes blazing. "What were you thinking? You can't buy my farm." "Why not?" he demanded. "I have money saved, more than enough for a place like this." "Because this isn't your home," she exploded. "You're passing through, remember, playing the hero for a few weeks before you move on to the next town, the next adventure." "I won't be your charity case, Kenton Ellis. I won't let you make promises you have no intention of keeping." Her words struck him like physical blows, all the more painful because there was truth in them. He had no roots, no plans to settle down. He'd been living day to day, enjoying her company without considering the future. "Lucy, just go," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, just go." For the first time in their acquaintance, Kenton saw tears in Lucy's eyes, not the quiet dignity she'd shown in the face of the town's rejection, but raw, naked pain. Pain that he had caused with his careless offer, his failure to consider what it might mean to her. He stood frozen, watching as a tear slipped down her cheek, then another. This proud, strong woman who had endured so much was crying because of him, because he'd made her hope, perhaps, for something he wasn't sure he could give. "I'm sorry," he said inadequately, backing away. "I didn't mean to hurt you." She turned away, shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. "You should leave, Kenton. Go back to your wandering. It's what you're good at." He mounted Diablo with a heavy heart, looking back at Lucy's small figure framed in the doorway of the home she was about to lose. Something twisted painfully in his chest. Regret, yes, but something else too. Something he hadn't felt in a decade. For the next 3 days, Kenton kept to himself, drinking more than was wise and turning over Lucy's words in his mind. He'd laughed at love for so long, convinced himself that attachment was a trap, a weakness. Yet the thought of riding away from Silverwater Creek from Lucy felt wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. On the 4th day, he woke with a clarity that surprised him. He bathed, shaved, and put on his cleanest clothes before heading to the bank. "I'd like to speak with the manager about a property transaction," he told the teller. An hour later, he emerged with a deed and a considerably lighter money belt. His next stop was the general store where he purchased supplies, ignoring the curious stares of the other customers. "Heard you had a falling out with the Emmett woman," Porter remarked as he wrapped Kenton's purchases. "Heard wrong," Kenton replied coolly. "And her name is Miss Emmett. You do well to remember that." His final stop was the telegraph office, where he sent a brief message to his brother in St. Louis. It was nearly sunset when he rode out to Lucy's farm, his saddlebags packed with supplies and his mind made up. She was sitting on her porch when he arrived, her expression guarded as she watched him approach. The small terrier barked half-heartedly, as if unsure whether to welcome him or warn him away. "I didn't expect to see you again," she said when he dismounted. Kenton removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands. "I owe you an apology, Lucy. You were right about me. I've been running for so long I forgot how to stand still." She remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I've been thinking about what you said, about promises and intentions." He took a deep breath. "I went to see Grayson today, bought your farm from him." Lucy's eyes widened in shock. "You did what?" "Before you get angry," he said quickly. "I want you to know that I bought it for you, not for me. It's yours free and clear. I've had the deed transferred to your name." She stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do that?" "Because you belong here," he said simply. "This is your home. Your father's mistakes shouldn't cost you that." Lucy stood slowly, descending the porch steps until she stood before him. "And what about you? Where do you belong, Kenton?" It was the question he'd been asking himself for days. "I don't know," he admitted. "For 10 years I've belonged nowhere, but these past weeks being here with you, it's the closest thing to belonging I've felt since I left Missouri." Her eyes searched his face. "Are you saying you want to stay?" "I'm saying I want to try," he replied honestly. "I can't promise I won't get restless. I can't promise it'll be easy, but I want to try, Lucy." "With you?" She was silent for so long that Kenton began to fear he'd misread everything, that his gesture had only made things worse. Then slowly she reached out and took his hand. "There's a lot of land here for one person to manage," she said, her voice unsteady but determined. "Too much, really." "Is that so?" he asked, hope rising in his chest. "A partner would be helpful," she continued, a tentative smile forming on her lips. "Someone who knows his way around a farm, someone willing to put in the work." Kenton stepped closer, hardly daring to breathe. "I might know someone who fits that description. Bit rough around the edges, tends to speak before he thinks, but he's learning." Lucy's smile widened. "I'm a teacher, remember. I have patience for slow learners." The distance between them closed, and Kenton found himself drawing her into his arms, marveling at how right it felt. When their lips met, it was gentle at first, then deepening with a certainty that took his breath away. "I never thought I'd say this," he murmured when they finally parted, "but I think I'm done running, Lucy Emmett." "Good," she replied, her eyes bright with unshed tears, happy ones this time. "Because I've grown rather fond of having you around, Kenton Ellis." Over the weeks and months that followed, Silverwater Creek watched with collective astonishment as the drifter who'd never stayed anywhere put down roots. Kenton and Lucy worked side by side, expanding the vegetable garden, adding more chickens, and eventually acquiring a small herd of dairy cows. It wasn't always easy. The town's attitude toward Lucy changed slowly, grudgingly, as Kenton's constant presence and unwavering support forced them to reconsider their judgment. Some, like Porter at the general store, never fully came around. Others, seeing Lucy's resilience and Kenton's determination, began to soften. The first time Kenton felt the urge to move on came that fall, when the leaves turned and the air grew crisp. The open road called to him with its familiar siren song. He saddled Diablo and rode out at dawn, telling Lucy he needed to check the property boundaries. He rode for hours, letting the horse have its head, feeling the freedom of movement that had been his constant companion for a decade. But as the sun began its westward journey, he found himself turning back, an unfamiliar anticipation building in his chest as the farmhouse came into view. Lucy was in the garden, harvesting the last of the summer vegetables, her hair catching the golden light of late afternoon. She looked up as he approached, her smile warming him more thoroughly than any campfire ever had. "Welcome home," she said simply, and Kenton knew then that he'd found what he'd been searching for all along. They were married the following spring, a small ceremony in Marshal Reeves' office with only a few witnesses present. Lucy wore a simple blue dress, not unlike the one she'd been wearing when they first met, and carried wildflowers gathered from their land. "Never thought I'd see the day," Reeves remarked as he signed the marriage certificate. The drifter and the outcast, proving the whole town wrong. "They'll have to find someone else to gossip about now," Lucy said, her hand firmly clasped in Kenton's. "Oh, I'm sure they'll manage," Kenton replied with a laugh. But there was no bitterness in it now, only the easy confidence of a man who had finally found his place in the world. As they walked back to their farm, their home, Kenton marveled at the journey that had brought him here. From a heartbroken young man fleeing his past to a husband with hopes for the future, the road had been long and winding. But standing beside the woman who had taught him to believe in love again, he wouldn't have changed a single step. "What are you thinking about?" Lucy asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. Kenton smiled, pulling her close as they crested the hill overlooking their property. "I was thinking about a foolish cowboy who used to laugh at love until he saw a brave woman cry." Lucy's eyes softened with understanding. "And now, he said, kissing her gently, "that cowboy knows that loving someone loving you is the greatest adventure of all.